In the bustling heart of the Roman Republic, when the white marble of the Senate gleamed under the Mediterranean sun and the Forum pulsed with the arguments, ambitions, and intrigues of the most powerful men in the world, there was one voice that could still the chaos. A voice that cut through the noise like the blade of a master swordsman. It was not the voice of a general fresh from conquest, nor the bark of a patrician born to command, but the carefully trained, deliberate, and relentless voice of a man who understood that ideas, once planted in the mind, could outlast empires. That man was Marcus Tullius Cicero. Cicero's life was proof that in the arena of politics, intellect could be a weapon as sharp as any legionary's sword. But his was not the story of a privileged aristocrat groomed for power from birth. He came into the world in 106 BCE in the small town of Arpinum, far from the grand marble temples and political stages of Rome. His family belonged to the equestrian order, a class wealthy enough to afford education but without the ancestral nobility that opened doors in the Senate. In Rome's rigid social order, that meant Cicero would have to climb, and climb hard, to stand among the ruling elite. From the beginning, he showed an insatiable hunger for learning. His parents recognized his gifts and sent him to Rome for the best education possible. There, he absorbed not just Roman rhetoric and law, but the treasures of Greek philosophy. He studied under the greatest teachers of his age, masters of oratory, logic, and ethics. He read Plato's dialogues and learned the art of questioning everything. He wrestled with Aristotle's system of logic, mastering the structure of argument. He absorbed the Stoic teachings of virtue and duty, and the Epicurean ideas of pleasure and the good life. These schools of thought would not remain abstract to him. He would later weave them into a practical philosophy for politics itself. As a young man, Cicero understood something few others grasped so early, that in Rome, the law was not just a set of rules, it was a stage. And the courtroom was where reputations were forged. He became a lawyer not only to serve justice but to sharpen his rhetorical sword. His early cases were small, but his skill in persuasion quickly caught attention. Then came the trial that would define the beginning of his career, the defense of Sextus Roscius. Roscius had been accused of the worst crime imaginable, killing his own father. But the case was rotten with political corruption. Behind it stood the shadow of Sulla, Rome's dictator, whose men sought to seize the Roscius estate. Cicero, barely 30 years old, took the risk. He knew what it meant to challenge those close to Sulla. It was to put one's own life in danger. Yet he stood before the court and dismantled the charges piece by piece, exposing the greed and manipulation behind them. His victory was not just legal, it was moral. It announced to Rome that here was a man who would speak the truth, even when it was dangerous. But Cicero was not reckless. He understood the delicate balance of ambition and survival. After the Roscius trial, he left Rome for a time, studying in Greece and the eastern provinces to perfect his oratory and deepen his philosophical understanding. He returned stronger, wiser, and ready to climb the cursus honorum, the ladder of Roman political offices. His rise was meteoric. As quaestor, a financial officer, he proved himself capable and incorruptible. As praetor, a judicial magistrate, he showed fairness and skill. But it was as consul, in 63 BCE, that Cicero would face the moment that would define his political legacy. That year, Rome faced a conspiracy that could have plunged the Republic into chaos. Lucius Sergius Catiline, was a charismatic but dangerous figure. Twice defeated in his run for consul, burdened with debt, and burning with ambition, Catiline gathered a band of discontented men, noblemen bankrupt from gambling, soldiers without cause, and political opportunists, plotting to overthrow the government by force. Cicero, through a network of informants, uncovered the plot. But knowing was one thing, acting was another. In the Senate, surrounded by men who doubted him, Cicero stood and delivered one of the most famous opening lines in political history, Quo usque tandem abutia, Catilina, patientia nostra. How long, O Catiline, will you abuse our patience? His voice, measured but laced with righteous fury, exposed the conspiracy in front of the entire Senate, shaming Catiline into leaving Rome. Yet the danger did not pass. The conspirators outside the city still planned to march on Rome with armed force. Cicero acted swiftly, rallying the Senate, gathering troops, and cutting off the rebellion before it could ignite. The captured conspirators were executed, an action for which Cicero would later be both praised as the savior of the Republic and condemned for overstepping legal bounds. But in that moment, his prestige was unmatched. He was hailed as Pater Patri, father of the fatherland. Yet in Rome, glory was fleeting. Cicero's unwavering defense of the Republic put him at odds with men whose ambitions reached beyond the Senate's walls. Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, the first triumvirate, redrew the lines of power, and Cicero found himself politically isolated. His enemies seized the opportunity. In 58 BCE, the tribune Clodius Pulcher passed a law targeting anyone who had executed Roman citizens without trial, the very act Cicero had authorized during the Catiline crisis. Facing exile, Cicero fled Rome. His exile was a humiliation. He wandered Greece, cut off from the forum, from the debates, from the heartbeat of political life. Yet even in despair, he turned to philosophy. In letters to friends, he poured out his grief, but also began to articulate a deeper understanding of fortune and resilience. His mind was too restless to stagnate. He studied, wrote, and prepared for his return. When political tide shifted, he was recalled to Rome, greeted by cheering crowds. The city had not forgotten him. But Rome was changing. The Republic was unraveling under the strain of personal rivalries and military power. Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE made civil war inevitable. Cicero, torn between loyalty to the Republic and his respect for Pompey, sided with Pompey's faction. After Caesar's victory, Cicero was spared. Caesar valued his intellect and perhaps his usefulness. Still, Cicero distrusted the concentration of power in one man's hands. To him, even a benevolent dictator was a threat to liberty. It was during these years that Cicero produced some of his greatest philosophical works. De Officiis, On Duties, laid out his vision of moral responsibility, blending Stoic virtue with practical governance. De Republica, On the Republic, explored justice, the common good, and the ideal state. For Cicero, politics was not a game of survival or dominance. It was the highest form of service. A politician's duty was to protect the rights and dignity of citizens, even at personal cost. The welfare of the people, he wrote, is the highest law. Then came the Ides of March, 44 BCE. Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators, many of whom believed they were restoring the Republic. Cicero was not among the conspirators, but he welcomed the possibility of freedom from dictatorship. That hope was short-lived. Power fell into the hands of Mark Antony, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Lepidus, the second triumvirate. Cicero saw Antony as the greater danger and unleashed a series of speeches, the Philippics, modeled on Demosthenes' attacks against Philip of Macedon. These speeches were relentless, painting Antony as corrupt, power-hungry, and unfit to lead. But words, no matter how sharp, could not shield him from the shifting tides of power. In 43 BCE, Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus struck a political bargain, each sacrificing enemies to solidify control. Antony demanded Cicero's death. On December 7, Cicero was captured while attempting to flee. He faced his executioners without fear, stretching out his neck, offering himself as a Roman who had lived, and would die, for the Republic. His head and hands were displayed in the Forum, a grotesque warning. Yet even in death, Cicero triumphed in the way that mattered most. His words lived on. His philosophy, his oratory, his vision of a republic rooted in justice and virtue would inspire generations, from the thinkers of the Renaissance to the framers of modern democratic constitutions. What, then, does Cicero teach us today? In an age when politics can feel like a contest of noise, when truth bends under the weight of ambition, and when the line between leadership and domination blurs, Cicero reminds us that politics without philosophy is blind, and philosophy without action is hollow. He teaches that the measure of power is not how much we can take, but how honorably we can use it. He shows us that leadership is not merely about winning elections or securing titles, it is about safeguarding the principles that allow a society to endure. And he warns us that when citizens grow indifferent to the erosion of justice, the republic, no matter how strong, will fall. Cicero lived in a time when the stakes were life and death, when standing for principle could mean exile or execution. We may not face his dangers, but we face his choices. Will we speak when it is easier to be silent? Will we defend justice when it costs us comfort? Will we see politics not as a ladder for personal gain, but as a duty to serve something greater than ourselves? The marble columns of the Roman Forum may be weathered and broken, but the echoes of Cicero's voice still reach us. And if we listen closely, we will hear the same call he made to his fellow citizens, to live with courage, to think with clarity, and to wield whatever power we have, not for ourselves, but for the common good. That, Cicero believed, was the highest form of politics. And it remains so today.